From the immortal classic to Rob Zombie to Blumhouse and beyond, this is the complete history of the Halloween series, Abridged. This is Nerdist Now. With the spookiest season upon us again and Michael Myers once more terrorizing the box office, what better time to take a look back at the Halloween franchise and offer everyone a refresher on its long and often complicated history, Halloween. To start, let's go back to the very beginning with the original John Carpenter classic. Released in 1978, Halloween tells the story of Michael Myers, a troubled boy who murdered his older sister on Halloween night in 1963, before being institutionalized under the care of psychiatrist Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by the late great Donald Pleasence. The doctor deemed Michael to be, well, the literal embodiment of pure evil, and is looking to see the killer locked up for good. However, when Loomis arrives to transfer Michael one dark and stormy night, he finds the mental asylum in chaos. Michael makes his great escape, commandeering Loomis's vehicle, and makes his way back home to Haddonfield. It is there that we are introduced to high schooler Laurie Strode, played famously by Jamie Lee Curtis, who has become as synonymous with the franchise as Michael Myers himself. As Michael makes his way into town, he procures his iconic white mask, which, as most fans know, was made from an altered mask of William Shatner. While Laurie's friends plan for some debaucherous Halloween activities, Laurie herself prepares for a night of babysitting. After Michael picks off Laurie's friends one by one, he eventually faces off against the final girl herself. The climactic showdown of Halloween is, simply put, one of the very best in horror history. With a suspenseful game of cat and mouse accompanied by Carpenter's eerie score, we see Laurie fighting for survival against the seemingly unstoppable masked killer. Thankfully, Dr. Loomis arrives to prescribe Michael with some medical-grade .38 caliber bullets that sent him stumbling back and falling out the window. But of course, you can't kill the Boogeyman, and the movie ends on an ominous note as Michael's body has once more disappeared into the night, and we are left with the haunting sound of Michael Myers' heavy breathing. Halloween 2. So, one of the things that is kind of unique about the Halloween franchise as opposed to the other popular slasher series like Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street is that Halloween has a pretty loose and complicated canon. I think the best way it is often described is that it's essentially a choose-your-own-adventure at this point when it comes to the film's sequels. Written again by John Carpenter, the film picks up at that same Halloween night and follows Dr. Loomis as he hunts for Michael Myers while Laurie is transported to a hospital. The film is a bit more dark and brutal than the first, as it tries to up the ante with Michael murdering his way through Haddonfield, trying to get to Laurie to finish the job. One important aspect this film adds to the canon is that in this version, it is revealed that Laurie is actually Michael's younger sister, who was adopted by the Strodes, which is why Michael is after her. Things come to a head with Michael chasing down Laurie in a final confrontation, this time in the hospital Laurie is being treated at. Loomis once more comes to Laurie's aid, but this time he is stabbed by Michael. Laurie manages to shoot Michael in his eyes, blinding him, and Loomis makes the ultimate self-sacrifice by blowing him and Michael up while Laurie makes her escape. Michael emerges from the fire but quickly collapses to the ground, where we watch his body smolder in flames. Halloween 2 definitely feels like the most conclusive of the film, with it explicitly implying both Loomis and Michael died in the explosion. As far as the choose-your-own-adventure element goes, this is definitely the most short and sweet, as it feels like a literal part 2 to the original, that both builds upon the story while offering a satisfying conclusion as a viewer. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. With Halloween 2 pretty much wrapping up the story of Michael Myers, the filmmakers decided to go back to the original plan for the series, which was to make it an anthology with each film telling a different spooky tale set around Halloween rather than continuing a single narrative thread. The result is the black sheep of the franchise, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. While mostly dismissed by fans for its lack of Michael Myers, Season of the Witch has thankfully and rightfully gained more appreciation over the years. The story centers around a doctor played by Tom Atkins, who stumbles upon a secret sinister plot by the Silver Shamrock Corporation involving their Halloween masks. The company's owner, Connell Cochran, is all about getting things back to the true spirit of Halloween, sacrificing children. The real reason for the season. So anyone who is wearing one of the Silver Shamrock masks when their broadcast goes live on Halloween night will have their heads turned into mush and creepy bugs and stuff will come out of it. I don't know, Stonehenge is involved. It's a wild movie, y'all. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. After the poor reception of Season of the Witch, it was ultimately decided to give audiences what they wanted and bring back Michael Myers. But wait, wasn't Michael killed off in Halloween 2? Yes, he was. He was also blinded with 2 bullets to the eyes, but hey, Who needs continuity when you've got sequels to make? Loomis is still alive too, with only some comically minor burns considering he was right at the center of an explosion. This is where we get into the next option for the choose your own adventure timeline, which loosely follows the continuity of the first two movies and picks up in a canon where Laurie is now dead, instead switching the focus to her young daughter Jamie, played by Danielle Harris. This film is also the beginning of what is known as the Thorn Trilogy, but more on that later. There's admittedly not much new story-wise, and the movie pretty much just draws on the same plot elements from the first two movies. Michael is on the loose after a prison transfer gone wrong, killing anyone and everyone in his path. Loomis is chasing after him, trying to warn anyone who will listen. And it all culminates with a chase and showdown where Michael dies, this time by getting shot and falling down a well. There are some memorable aspects to this entry, namely Danielle Harris as Jamie. For being such a young actress at the time, Harris delivers a very effective performance and fills the void Laurie leaves nicely. It also introduces a pretty interesting cliffhanger in which we see Jamie taken over by whatever dark forces controlled Michael as she murders her stepmother. This seemed to be setting up Jamie as the potential new killer for the franchise moving forward, but like Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th, this would ultimately end up being abandoned by the time the next sequel came around. Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers. The Revenge of Michael Myers picks up right where the previous film left off, and this time shows Michael escaping through the well and making his way out into a river where he stumbles upon a hermit who takes care of him, despite Michael very clearly wanting to murder him when they first meet. Meanwhile, a year later, Jamie is now under the care of a children's mental hospital, and again, the whole teaser at the end of part 4 is pretty much disregarded. She also has a psychic connection to Michael now as she sees him wake up, murder the hermit, and begin his new bloody killing spree. The movie shifts focus to a new group of teenagers who spend a good chunk of the movie playing practical jokes to scare each other until the real Michael Myers shows up and takes them all out one by one. Dr. Loomis returns as well, once again attempting to convince all who will listen that Michael is alive and on the loose. The climax takes place at the old Myers house, where Loomis and Sheriff Meeker have set up a trap. Loomis attempts to reason with Michael, but that goes about as well as you would expect. Michael then proceeds to chase Jamie throughout the house and almost kills her, but is stopped when she refers to him as Uncle. You see, Michael has a soft spot after all. He even takes off his mask, but then promptly freaks out when Jamie touches him. Loomis then, in a somewhat weird, out-of-character moment, uses Jamie as bait to lure in Michael so that he can use a tranquilizer gun to subdue him. When that fails, Loomis instead opts for a surgical 2x4 to beat his favorite patient unconscious before collapsing on top of him from a stroke. The movie ends with Michael being arrested and thrown in a dark prison cell, and features a legitimately chilling exchange in which Meeker comforts Jamie, telling her Michael will remain there until he dies, to which she responds,
"Never die."
It's an effective ending and would have been the perfect way to close out the film, but then a mysterious man in black who appeared throughout the movie shows up and breaks Michael out to set up the final part of the Thorn Trilogy. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, aka Halloween 666. Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers is an absolute train wreck, which is a real shame because honestly, there are a lot of things it brings to the table that I do think could have worked if done better. The film itself picks up years after Halloween 5 and opens with Jamie, now a teenager, giving birth after being abducted by the cult who freed Michael at the end of the previous film. Jamie escapes with the baby and is ultimately killed by Michael, but not before hiding the baby away safely. The movie then switches focus to new members of the Strode family who, for some reason, now live at the old Myers house, as well as their neighbor, an adult version of Tommy, the little boy Laurie was babysitting in the original, now played by the immortal Paul Rudd. Tommy ends up finding Jamie's baby at the bus station and naturally decides to take him in. You know, like you do when you find random babies. Loomis is back as well, now attempting to live a quiet life of retirement. But poor Loomis can't catch a break and is pulled back into the action when Michael returns to Haddonfield. So the main thing Curse incorporates into the series is an explanation for why Michael does what he does. Tommy has been obsessively researching the subject since being traumatized as a child and reveals that Michael is being controlled by an ancient druid curse known as the Thorn. The symbol seen throughout Halloween 5 is actually a constellation that appears on Halloween and requires the blood sacrifice of the cursed family, which is why Michael has such a fixation on murdering his next of kin. The whole cult thing is a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, I do like the way that it connects the series back to the more sinister origins of Halloween, but it also takes away a lot of what made Michael so terrifying in the original film and just generally makes things way more complicated. In the producer's cut, there's also a whole thing about the Strode's son, Danny, being cursed by the Thorn as well, with the cult wanting to use him to create a new murder baby. In the end, there are a bunch of reveals about who is in the cult, including Dr. Wynn from the original, who turns out to be the Man in Black we saw in Part 5 and the leader of the whole shindig. He tries to convince Loomis to join them, but he politely declines and is promptly knocked out. Things wrap up with Michael turning on the cult, killing Wynn, and then facing off against Tommy, who just sort of beats Michael to death with a metal pipe. Loomis reappears as Tommy and the Strodes make their escape, and the movie ends on a bizarre note with a final shot showing Michael's mask lying next to a syringe on the floor and the sound of Dr. Loomis screaming. As mentioned, there is a producer's cut known as Halloween 666 that offers a bit of a different version of the film that makes some improvements. The main difference is in the endings, which originally featured Tommy stopping Michael with some magic stones, and then Loomis discovering the body and revealing it to be Wynn in Michael's clothing. Michael escapes into the night dressed as the Man in Black, and the Thorn symbol appears on Loomis's wrist, teasing that he will now be the leader of the cult as he begins screaming, which is where the audio comes from in the theatrical cut's ending. Sadly, the main reason for this change in ending was the real-world passing of Donald Pleasance, who died shortly after filming, as the original ending was intended to set Loomis up as a significant part in future sequels. The Curse of Michael Myers would prove to be the final outing for the Thorn continuity. While sequels were thrown around and discussed, with the passing of Donald Pleasance and interest from Jamie Lee Curtis to return for the series' 20th anniversary, the Halloween franchise would instead seek to reinvent itself once more. And that's part 1 of our history of the Halloween franchise. But in the meantime, tell us, which Halloween movie is your favorite? Have you seen Halloween Kills yet? Let us know in the comments below, and for the spookiest and scariest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com. Happy Nerdoween, everybody!